There they are. How are you feeling?
We're here.
Okay, that doesn't answer the question.
I have a babysitter here.
Thank God for modern medicine.
See you. Walk around with this thing all the time.
Okay. Well, if that's if that's all that has to be done, then
So far, so good.
so far so good. Oh, wow. Oh, I'm sorry you had to go through that.
No pain, just tired.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we just need a little table for
Uh-huh.
Susan. Okay. Other than that, everything's good for me. Rabbi, would you like some tea? Can I make you tea?
I'll get it in a little
Okay.
bit. Thank you, though.
Sounds good. Actually, I got here, I had a perm before, and it was wild.
quick setup.
You only need 1 cup now, huh?
So he still has to have 2 cups. It didn't take long to make, but it's like a Japanese show.
She can make one for me.
Do you want cookie or
Take mine home.
he can make his own.
What does this have to do with Zanzibar?
It doesn't, but I got permission to go off script for one more class. To me, this stuff is fascinating. And I hope that you will love
Okay, sorry about that. I just wasn't thinking. Okay, so as I was saying, I just want to bring a little update from last week's lecture. And that is that in this week, Netanyahu dismissed the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, and replaced him with the Minister of Tourism, Isaac Katz. That's kind of interesting, huh? A Minister of Tourism becomes the Minister of Defense, one of the most important positions in the cabinet. Okay, so the question then is, why did that happen? Because of differences. And so you'll have to recall what we spoke about last week in terms of Netanyahu and his reliance on the far-right coalition in order to keep his prime ministership. So what were the problems with Gallant? Gallant wanted no exceptions for military service, meaning that the ultra-Orthodox would have to serve in the military. What do you think the far right wants? The far right doesn't want the ultra-religious to serve in the military. So they keep delaying the implementation by the Supreme Court. What's the second issue? There were the other big issue that Gallant wanted was concessions by Israel in order to get the hostages back. And he said, look, it's going to be painful, but we have to get the hostages back, and it's going to be painful for Israel to make the concessions that we have to make, but the IDF will work it out. So, knowing those two things, do you think the ultra-right liked those two issues? No. In order for Netanyahu to keep the far right in his coalition and to keep the far right happy, and because he himself has moved even a little bit more to the right, he had to get rid of Gallant and replace him with Katz. Katz is a member of both. Gallant and Katz are Likud members. So they're not far right party members, but Katz is seen as much more hawkish, meaning much more willing to stay in the war, much more willing to use military options than Gallant was. So that is why Netanyahu replaced Gallant and why Katz would become a better alternative. It's all about him keeping his strength with the far right. And that's what we talked about last week. Do you think that, the question is, do you think the far right does not care about the hostages because the hostages are not religious? I don't think that I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's that they don't care about them because they're not religious. I think they care more, the far right, I think they care more about their agenda, their political agenda with land, and it's. I think that the idea that people are expendable in order for us to either get Gaza back for Israel or for us to stay in power by assuring that the war keeps going. Gary.
So according to the most recent statistics, according to most recent statistics that I read, which is like a month ago, the vast majority of Israelis per se do not want to make the kind of concessions that will allow Hamas to carry out another October 7th, because a lot of those people who have previously were freed were the ones who came in and killed multiple Israelis.
I think, in addition to what Gary said, one very important issue here is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, getting the religious into the armed forces.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to give you that little update. Now, I want to get into today's material because I love today's material. It's super interesting to me. I hope it's interesting to you as well. But to me, as a theology nerd, this is super interesting to me. Okay, so last Saturday, we read the Parsha of Noah. Okay, we all know basically Noah's story, the ark, the animals, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I want to read you a very curious passage before that. And then we have to try to answer the question, why does God flood the earth? Because our story doesn't tell us. Here's our story. This is chapter 6. When men began to increase on earth and daughters were born to them, the divine beings saw how beautiful the daughters of men were and took wives. The divine being took wives from among those that pleased them. The Lord said, "My breath shall not abide in man forever, since he too is flesh. Let the days allowed him to be 120 years. Oh, now we're mortal and we only get 120 years because God isn't happy. It was then and later too that the Nephilim appeared on earth. What? Who are the Nephilim? When the divine beings cohabited with the daughters of men. What? The divine beings had sex with the daughters of men who bore them offspring. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown. Okay. The Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth. What? The Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth. What wickedness? What? There was nobody talked about wickedness, and nobody said it was really bad. Where did that come from? And how every plan devised by his mind was nothing but evil all the time. What? Where does it say that? It doesn't. We just get this statement that God saw how bad everything was, and he said, I'm going to destroy the earth, and he sent Noah. And we never find out what was so bad. So, if we look at the left column here, here's our story that our tradition presents. That there were some people called divine beings. In the Hebrew, they're called B'nai HaElohim. And they took wives, and their offspring were called the Nephilim, and they were called the heroes of old and the men of renown. So they were mortal beings who were really renowned. They were like big, important human beings. And then God's angry and destroys the earth. I want to skip this initial step right here where the rabbis come in and they sanitize our story. Because now I want to present to you the stories from which Genesis 6:1 came. Because what we're going to find out is the rabbis looked at these stories and they said, oh, no, it didn't happen that way. No, it couldn't have happened that way. And they clean it up for us. And we never get the original story. So we only get a couple of lines that suggest there's something more to this story that they're not telling us. So I want to go to the Apocrypha. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the Apocrypha are sets of books that some Jewish communities were reading, especially the Essenes, especially the Essenes, and these books were rejected by the rabbis and didn't make their way into the Bible. But there were Jewish communities that were reading them. And they were heavily influenced by Zoroastrianism. You'll recall that when the exiles returned from Babylonia around 538 BCE, they had been in exile for around 40 years. So they had learned many of the Zoroastrian traditions. Zoroastrianism has a very well-developed theology of angels and demons. Up until this time, what did we know about angels in Judaism? Well, Abraham saw an angel at the tent, and angels were human beings that God sent down to earth to deliver a message, which is why they're called malachim, messengers. They're called malachim. So they were simply a way that God could get a message to human beings. After the Babylonian exile, however, all of a sudden we get a fairly large proliferation of angels and demons in Jewish tradition. And the rabbis had to kind of contend with these angels and demons because they were the people were learning about them, and they believed in them. And so the rabbis had to, well, we can't just say there aren't any. We have to manage them. And so basically what we are going to find out is that the rabbis clipped the angels' wings and did not allow them to do many of the things that they were allowed to do in other traditions. So I want to go to the Apocrypha now and look at, there are two books especially, the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees. In both books, we have an earlier rendition of our story that tells us what happened and why God was so upset. Enoch and Jubilees are not read by normative Jews. It's not in our Bible anywhere. They're books that are apart. But they offer us some significant clues about what some Jewish communities were reading and thinking. And some of that information has clearly made it into our Bible. In addition, what predating even the Apocrypha, there were stories that were floating around the ancient Middle East. So, for instance, as you see up here, we said that there were divine beings who came to earth and had sex with mortal women. That's what we read in our Bible. It wasn't very clearly spelled out at all because the rabbis were like, I don't want to talk about that so much, but here, it just says we got to go, okay? But these were very well-known stories. So Zeus, as many of you may remember, Zeus comes to earth and has sex with Alcmene, and who is their offspring? Hercules. That's how Hercules comes into being, because Zeus has sex with a mortal woman, and Hercules, as you'll remember, is half mortal and half divine, and then he attains fully divine status. The ancient chief god of the Canaanites, El, E-L, El, comes down to earth and has sex with two women, Shachar and Shalem. And their offspring are divine. Now, Rosa just went, wait a minute, Shachar, Shalem, those sounds like Hebrew words. And they are. Where do we get Shacharit, dawn? Where do we get completeness, Shalem? From the Canaanites. Now, this should not surprise us. My next statement will, if you are interested, I'll do another entire class on it because it's super duper interesting, but it's not possible today in this class. But if we look at the origin of the Israelites, where did we come from? Okay, we know our story. We were Hebrew slaves in the land of Egypt. Moses took us out, brought us across the Red Sea, and we became a people. We wandered into Canaan, we conquered Canaan, and then we settled there. That's our official story. If we look at what the academics think, there are 4 prevailing theories, basically, about how the Israelites became the Israelites. All of them include in some form or another that the original Israelites were Canaanites. And they either moved from the lowlands up to the highlands, or they were joined by other nomadic groups and became a homogeneous group. But to some extent, the Israelites were, to some degree, Canaanites to start off. Now, that makes sense, and I'll tell you why. Because El, the chief god of the Canaanites, that's like Zeus for the Greeks. We have El all over the place in our liturgy. In the Amidah for Shabbat, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Ha-El Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanorah El Elyon Gomel Chasadim. It's all over. How did we Israelites recognize El as anything? The Canaanites were our enemies. Anyway, at some point, if you want, I'll do a whole class on the origin of the Israelites and the various theories and who says what. And okay, so we have El coming to earth, having sex with Shachar and Shalem, and they have progeny. We have Zeus coming to earth. We don't have Adonai, Yahweh, coming to earth, having sex with any individuals. That was definitely not okay for our God. But what do we have, especially what we are going to find in the Apocrypha? We have B'nai HaElohim, the angels, coming to earth and having sex with mortal women. How did that happen? So I want to go now and read you from the book of Enoch, and I hope you find this as cool as I do. I get excited with this stuff. All right. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. Same thing we have in our story. And the angels, in our story it says divine beings, and the angels, the children of heaven, B'nai Ha-Elohim. And again, you want to look at, how does the name of our God become Elohim? Elohim, from the Canaanites. What? And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. So the angels in heaven said, Ooh, I like her. Let's get down there and get busy. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of a great sin. So Semyaza, the lead angel, says to all the other angels, look, I'm not doing this by myself because we're going to get figured out. God's going to see us. And if we're doing this, I'm not doing this by myself, and I'm not going to get punished by myself. And I think all of you guys are going to back out at the last minute. So you better let me know. Are we doing this or are we not doing this? And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. They swore all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it, and they were in all 200. So there were 200 angels, and they said, we're in. We're going with you. Here we go. All right. None of this is in our story. All we said is that, yeah, there were divine beings who came down and had sex with women. That's it. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations on it. And these are the names of their leaders. Samlazaz, their leader, or Semyaza, Arakalba, Ramil, Kokablel, Tamlel, Ramlel, Daniel, Ezekiel, and these are their chiefs of 10. So they were grouped in like 20 groups of 10 angels. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives. So they went down to earth and they took mortal wives. And they began to go unto them and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them, what did they do? They taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots and made them acquainted with plants. So what did they do? The angels came down and they taught human beings knowledge that human beings were not supposed to have yet. They taught them all kinds of things with the sciences, we're going to find out in a minute about warfare, all kinds of things that human beings should not have known yet. Okay. And they became pregnant. The women, obviously, became pregnant. And they bore great giants whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink their blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Okay, so these angels, they came down to earth, they had sex with mortal women, and the children were these giants who destroyed the earth. They ate one another, they ate all the human beings, they spilled blood everywhere, they killed everything. And Azazel, we have an angel named Azazel. Who is Azazel? We have Satan for Satan. Azazel?
Yes, the Passover story, it does two goats. One was designed for sacrifice, the other one to Azazel.
Good. Yom Kippur story. So, very good. Very good, Zisel. So, yeah. I'm going to repeat it. So, on Yom Kippur, what you'll recall that what Aaron did is that the people gave him 2 goats. And one of the goats, he placed all the sins of the people on, and then he sent the goat out into the wilderness. The name of the goat was Azazel, and he was sent into the wilderness. Who is Azazel? Azazel is the Canaanite goat god. Goat god. What? We have a Canaanite goat god? Because maybe we were Canaanites to begin with, or partly Canaanites to begin with, and we were worshiping a goat god, and that goat god made it into our tradition. Okay, so what did Azazel do? The angel Azazel. He taught men how to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working with them, and bracelets and ornaments. So he taught humankind how to metallurgy, how to make metal, and how to fashion items of war. Okay. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Amaros, the resolving of enchantments. Barakial taught astrology. Kokabel taught the constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds. Arakiel, the signs of the earth. So the angels brought human beings knowledge in many areas that human beings weren't ready to have yet. God had not set it up this way. But the angels came down and said, let's show them how to do all this cool stuff. And they showed the human beings, they had no idea what to do with all this stuff. And they ran wild with it, and they created havoc. So what did God do? Then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed on the earth. Who are Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, and Raphael? The archangels. In our tradition, they're called ministering angels. But they are the archangels, meaning they are the four most powerful angels in heaven, especially Gabriel and Michael. When God wants to punish human beings, he sends Gabriel. So in other words, the person who had talked to Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah, that was Gabriel in disguise. When God wants to send mercy to human beings, whom does he send? He sends Michael, because Michael's essence is water, and he's flowing, and it's merciful. Gabriel's essence is fire. Now, very interesting teaching, because one of my favorite teachings of all. We say Kaddish all the time, and you've never thought about this before. At the end of the Kaddish, what do we say? Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh shalom bimromav. Oseh, the one, shalom, who makes peace, bimromav, in the heavens. Did you ever think about that? Why does God have to make peace in the heavens? What's going on in the heavens that there's no peace? What? Well, you have rebellious angels in other traditions and in our earlier tradition. But in our tradition, the angels can't, we're going to talk about that in a minute, the angels can't rebel. God, the rabbis took that power away from them. So what's going on in the heavens that God has to make peace? Where's the, craziness in the heavens? Well, the rabbis come along and save us. Gabriel is made of fire. Michael is made of water. Water and fire can't be together. So what does God do? God makes peace in the heavens so that fire and water can coexist at the same time. I love that teaching. Love that teaching. Okay. So Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel saw what was going on earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said to one another, the earth made without inhabitant cries the voice of their crying up to the gates of heavens. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit, saying, bring your cause before the Most High. The angels say to other good angels who are still in heaven, the 200 bad ones are down on earth. The good angels up in heaven, Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael, say to them, look, you guys, look what's going on down there. We better tell God what's happening. Don't you think that makes sense? The good people on earth are screaming out to us. We better go tell all this to God. And bring our cause before the Most High. And they said to the Lord of ages, they said to God, Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and the God of the ages, the throne of your glory stands unto all the generations of the ages, and your name holy and glorious and blessed until all. You have made all things and have power over all things, and all things are naked and open in your sight, and you see all things, and nothing can hide from you. Look what Azazel has done down there. Are you kidding me? He has taught all unrighteousness on earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Semyaza, look what he did, to whom you have given authority to bear rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men, and they have slept with the women. They have defiled themselves and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants. And the whole earth is thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now, behold, the souls of all those who have died are crying, and they're making their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended, and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought in them. And you know all these things before they come to pass, and you see all these things. You do suffer them also, and you don't say to us, what are we able to do in regard to these? So the angels go to God and say, look what's going on down there. You can't allow this to happen. And so what does God do? God sends Gabriel and Michael down there to imprison the 200 angels and bring them up to heaven and put them in an eternal heavenly prison. And then what does God say to Noah? Oh, we're going to start over again. Let's do this one more time. And so all of a sudden now, with the earlier tradition, we say, oh, I get it. I see what happened. There was a whole lot of bad stuff going on the earth, right? There was a whole lot of bad stuff. And God had kind of no choice at that point because the Nephilim were destroying the earth and destroying humankind. Humankind had all kinds of knowledge that it shouldn't have had, and they were using it incorrectly. And it was chaos and havoc in the earth. Now, once again, all of that gets changed into, where is it? The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness. When God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on earth, God said to Noah, I've decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness. That's our story. And we have no clue what was behind it. But now you understand what was behind it. Now the rabbis had to contend with this tradition of the angels coming down to earth. So if we now go to the right side here. So within the Apocrypha are the remnants of ancient myths, right? Where gods of other traditions have come down and had sex with mortal women and have had divine offspring. Those were well-known myths throughout the ancient Middle East. And we have some of that in our tradition as well. That shouldn't surprise us. We were the newcomers in the Middle East. And if in fact we were Canaanites who were joined by other nomadic groups and we all band together and said, okay, now we're going to be the Israelites. And we're going to have this story that we were Hebrew slaves, and in another class I'll tell you how that might have happened. But now we have this story about how we were Hebrew slaves, God brought us out, etc., etc. We got to figure out what's our stories. Well, everybody else around the Middle East had a flood story, like Noah. Everybody else. The Babylonians had the Enuma Elish, the creation of the world. Gilgamesh, very, very, very famous story in the ancient world about a flood. Everybody had a flood story. Well, we got to have a flood story too, and a creation story too. But we got to have one that conforms with our idea that there's only one God. So we got to modify these stories a little bit so that it makes sense for one God. Well, our God can't come down to earth and do these things that other gods do. That's pagan. We're not doing that. But it could be that the God's children, the angels, would do that, and then we have the same story, just a little bit changed. So, the children of heaven, rather than the divine beings, the children of heaven, meaning the angels, there is a rebellion in heaven led by Semyaza, who gets 200 other angels to follow him, and they come down and wreak havoc on the earth. And then the archangels, they took the wives and they taught them terrible skills that they weren't, not terrible skills, they taught them skills that they weren't supposed to have yet, too early. And out of them came the Nephilim, or giants. Now, Nephilim comes from the Hebrew root N-F-L, Nophel, to fall. So, when we talk about fallen angels or fallen ones, right? We don't talk about that really in our tradition. People do talk about it in Christianity, right? Because Satan is a fallen angel. We don't have that. The rabbis were very, very, they're not happy with this tradition at all. The Nephilim come, Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Raphael go down, and then the Nephilim get imprisoned and taken away, and so they can't wreak havoc anymore, and we start off with Noah. Okay. Let's go back to this side. The rabbis sanitize the story. The rabbis know this tradition from the Apocrypha. Absolutely they do, because our tradition starts with the exact same words that the tradition from the Apocrypha starts. So they know this tradition. Why do the rabbis not like the story from the Apocrypha? The rabbis don't like it because the angels have a whole lot of power. Semyaza says to the other angels, I'm not doing this alone because we're going to get punished, and I'm not taking the punishment by myself. So they know what they're doing is wrong. They know what they're doing is against God's wishes, but they do it anyway. Yes. Now, when the rabbis get a hold of that, they're like, oh, no. Nobody can nobody can make a decision to go against God. Nobody has that power. God is here. The angels can't do that. They can't say to God, no, I don't think we're doing that. No. And the rabbis say, absolutely not. Nope. Now, how do we know that? When we read the book of Job, Hasatan has to do what in order to start messing with Job? If you, say again? Entice him. Okay, if you'll remember the story. So, Job is presented as this really righteous guy. And Hasatan goes to God and says, you think Job is so righteous? Oh, please, give me a break. Come on now. If we go down and mess with him a little bit, if we give him some tourists, you'll see how fast he becomes unrighteous. You'll see how fast he disavows you. You'll see it. So, in order to prove my point, God, is it okay with you if I go down and mess with Job? And God says yes. But Satan had to ask God permission first. That's crucial. He doesn't have free will. The angels, according to the rabbis, can only do what God tells them to do. They cannot make any decision on their own. They are simply messengers from God, and God says, okay, I'm dispatching Gabriel to go down to earth and take care of this. Michael, I need you to handle this. Uriel, Raphael, go handle this.
I understand that they can only perform one task. Whatever the task was assigned by God, that's the only thing they can do.
Okay, so Zishel says, I understand that they only have one task, and whatever was assigned by God, that's what they have to do. Basically, yes. They just have to carry out God's instructions. They don't get to go off script and do what they want to do. They don't get to do that. Why? Because the rabbis could not deal with angels who could say no to God or who could change God's instructions. And so the big chidush, the big new thing that the rabbis inject in our tradition is that angels are very, very limited in what they can do. Completely unlike Semyaza and his followers who did whatever they wanted and said, well, we're going to get punished, but we're going to have a whole lot of fun before we do, so we're going. Yes? But those 4 angels are in the bedtime prayer. Yes. And why? Because by the time the rabbis get a hold of these traditions, the people were already believing in angels and demons as well. At a Jewish funeral, we place how many shovelfuls of dirt on the grave? 3. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, an odd number. That's the key. We place an odd number of shovelfuls. Where does that come from? And the answer is we don't know, but I will offer you a possibility. In general, Judaism didn't like even numbers for some reason, some superstitious reason. It didn't like even numbers. There is, I came upon this amazing story in the Talmud about the demon Asmodeus. In Hebrew, it's Hashmodai. Asmodeus, and it says, Asmodeus waits outside the tavern. And he waits for the men to come out of the tavern. And so, for instance, if you're a man and you come out and you say, wow, I had 2 drinks, I'm kind of drunk, Asmodeus goes right after you. If, however, you've had 3 drinks, you're okay. So, what the Talmud says is, if you are a man who's had 2 drinks, you are supposed to come out of the tavern and say, oh, those 3 drinks were so much, so you can avoid Asmodeus coming after you. So there was a tradition that 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 were lucky, that you avoid the demons with odd numbers, and you bring on demonic retribution with even numbers. What about Chai with 18? Okay, so now the rabbis were struggling, clearly, with these traditions. Let me read you from the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is Midrash. Who can tell me what Midrash is? Good. Good. So when the rabbis come across it's basically stories from the, basically stories, Zishel said. I apologize. Yes, basically stories. That's what Midrash is. And why are there stories? Because the rabbis come across something that is information that's missing. So we all know the story about Abraham and the smashing of the idols, right? Or we've heard something about that story. That's not in our Torah anywhere. That's Midrash. The rabbis imagined, well, how did Abraham decide there was only one God? How did that happen? And they created a story. And that story has authority in Jewish tradition. So Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer are stories that the rabbis create in order to figure out something that's not clear. So, hang on one sec. Okay, so the idea of B'nai HaElohim, who are they and what did they do? Well, Rabbi Meir said, the generations of Cain went around stark naked, men and women, just like the beasts, and they defiled themselves with all kinds of immorality. A man with his mother or his daughter, or the wife of his brother, or the wife of his neighbor, in public and in the street. They had streets? Okay, well. And in the streets, with evil inclination, which is in the thought of their heart. And the law saw that the wickedness of man was great on earth. Oh, okay, so that's how Rabbi Meir explains what was going on earth. That the men and women, they all ran around naked and they all had incest, and that's what the problem was. Rabbi, another person, Rabbi said, the angels who fell from their holy place in heaven saw the daughters of the generations of Cain walking about naked with their eyes painted like harlots. And they went after them and took wives from them. And the sons of Elohim, B'nai HaElohim, saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all that they chose. Rabbi Joshua said, the angels are flaming fire. His servants are flaming fire. And the fire came with the coition of flesh and blood, meaning that when everybody started having sex, there was fire. But then they fell from heaven, from their holy place, their strength and stature like that of the sons of men, and their frame was made of the clods of dust. Okay. I want to go to one more. This one. So Rabbi Joshua said, and I'll finish with this today, the Israelites are called sons of God, as it is said, and you are the sons of the Lord your God. This is Deuteronomy 14. Okay, so we have this phrase, sons of God. The angels are also called sons of God. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, this is Job and the heavenly council. And whilst they were still in their holy place in heaven, these were called sons of God. And also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So, the final act for the rabbis was to understand the Nephilim became humans. And they became the great men of renown and the heroes of old. That's in our story. Why did that happen? Because the rabbis couldn't have Nephilim, giants who were of divine origin going around devouring the earth. So who did the Nephilim become? They became the great men of renown, the great men of our tradition. The rabbis, they didn't identify themselves with it, but yes, you understand. These were like the great statesmen of the past in our tradition. Not in our tradition. In the Apocrypha, yes. And so what did the rabbis do? They ended the story with, unless you think there are angels running around here and there are big Nephilim over the place. No. You're just reading this wrong. The Nephilim were the great men of Judaism, the men of renown in our tradition. Because the verse clearly says up front that B'nai HaElohim came down to earth and had sex with mortal women. And the rabbis were, oh, God, what are we doing with this? Right? And they had to sanitize the story and change it. So now you understand when it says in our tradition, and there was great wickedness on earth and God had to destroy the earth. Now you understand what that wickedness was according to a more ancient tradition and why God had to destroy the earth. The rabbis glossed over it very quickly and didn't want you to know too much. They just said, there was a lot of wickedness. God had to destroy the earth. So now we get our story of Noah. And they went right to Noah. And they just said, there's nothing behind the curtain here, folks. Nothing behind the curtain, right? All right, everyone. Have a great day. And we will go next week with diaspora communities. And at some point, we can talk about Israelite origins and the prevailing academic theories about how Israelites became the Israelites. Good. That brings up a couple of questions about the giants that the Israelites encountered in Canaan. And also we have this wonderful knowledge, maybe we are not ready either. So yes, there is a reference as we move forward in the Torah when the Israelites enter Canaan and they talk about the Anakites, the giants in Canaan. And remember also, when the spies come back and they report, what do they say? There were giants in the land. We were like grasshoppers. They're going to smush us. We shouldn't go in there. So, yes, there is a reference later on to this idea that there are giants and were giants in the land. Yeah, absolutely. Have a great week, everyone. Goliath, sure. You're welcome. It was fun.
Rabbi, before you go, we can talk about some more time. The colonel. I was a Navy for a long, long time. One naval architect in the Navy was interested in the Bible. He inputted all the measurements given in the Torah about the ark. They came out that it's an extremely stable craft. It wasn't supposed to move, but it wasn't supposed to tip over.
Right.
Extreme stability.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
Well, it validates our conclusion about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
everybody here. Hello, everybody at home. It's good to see you. So, today, we're going to say the blessing for learning, and we are going on to another segment of ethics, and the title today is Honesty, Integrity, and Truth. It's mostly going to be an internal look at ourselves, because right now we're dealing with the question of ethics that emerges from us, as we did last week. But I know it's, on a day after an election, it's, everybody is kind of like off balance sometimes. And so what I don't want, and I'm going to say this from the very beginning, is what I don't want is to do any of these texts from any kind of political viewpoint. And I'll say why. We're sitting in a room with all of us together. And sometimes all of us together make assumptions of the fact that everybody who's surrounding them agrees with them. And that's not the case. We are in a synagogue and in a community where we respect all of us, and we respect our democracy, and we respect everything that creates the world in which we live. So I don't want, so if you get to a point where you're looking at a text and it looks political to you, either way, either way, keep it to yourself and take it as whatever kind of learning experience you want, and let's deal with it from the perspective of the text. Now, the reason that I'm saying this, and please forgive me, is because I've walked into a lot of rooms to teach a lot of things or have a lot of conversations, and it seems like that's always the direction it goes, and I don't want it to do that. So that's my take on it. So what I'd like to do is have us do the blessing for learning and then step into it with an eye towards ourselves. So, blessing for learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. May we all be immersed in the words of Torah and take a look communally and mostly inside as we take a look at today's texts. They're pretty amazing. I'm going to pass out, or I'm not going to pass out this material. First of all, I'm not going to pass out. Second of all, I'm not going to pass out this information because I always have helpers passing things out. But I think you might find this interesting as we delve into this material. So anybody else ready to help distribute? Thank you, Berna. So the first thing you're going to see when you get it is something that all of you don't have in hand yet, but I'm going to read it. And I want you to do some self-searching. And believe me, when I was preparing for this, I did some self-searching as well. Here it is. On a scale of 1 to 10, think, but don't say out loud, how much honesty and integrity you think you have. And we're going to deal with these terms in a moment, but sometimes it's important for us to take a real look. Here's the thing, we're all good people. I'm going to assume that everybody in this room is a good person, but there are scales of this. So try to think about, are you really a person all the time of integrity, honesty? Yeah. And don't say it, you don't have to say it to anybody. So let's take a minute. That they're the same? Honesty and, well, we're not defining them yet. We will be when we look at the texts. But right now, it's about honesty and integrity. So honesty and integrity may be linked to each other, but they're not necessarily exactly the same word. We don't have to sink or drown ourselves in this question. Just take enough time. So let me give an example. You went, I know it's not you. I'm just giving this. You went to go see a movie at a movie theater when your kids or your niece or nephew were little. And you get to the place where you pay, the ticket booth where you're going to pay for the movie. And the movie says, if the child is 4 years and younger, the child goes for free. But your child who's with you is not 4 years or under, but instead is 5.5. Have you ever done something like that where you get to the place where you're supposed to pay X number of dollars for something and you fudge the age of your child? Or, same movie theater, we are 50 years old and it says if you're 55 and above, you get to go to the movies for $6, but if you're not 55 and above, you have to pay $9 for your movie ticket. Have we ever done that? So I'm not suggesting that when we think about our own personal honesty or integrity, that we're thinking about the fact that we robbed a bank or that we broke into somebody's house and stole their diamond bracelet. It's not like that. Do you understand?
Yes.
It's the smaller things. When we have dealt with people, have we sometimes been disingenuous in the way that we say things to them? I'll tell you something I did this weekend. I went to a bar mitzvah this weekend. I was in another congregation that where I know a lot of people from Northern California. Believe me, I do self-check when I'm putting these things together. And somebody had passed away. A man in the congregation who was in his late 90s had passed away. And his daughters were there. No, not during the service. No, he had, a few weeks before I got there for the bar mitzvah, he had passed away. I did not like that man. I did not like him at all, Sam I am. However, I went up to the daughters and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear of your father's passing. He was an outstanding man." Now, I could have just gone up to the daughters and say, "I'm so sorry for you that your father passed away. I didn't have to add the lie, right? So as we go through these texts today, so I already got something for next Yom Kippur. As we go through these today, you don't have to think heavy. You have to think real everyday life, right? Okay, so let's move in to how Judaism at our very inceptions creates this sense of the need for ethics. So would somebody be willing to read where it says line 11? And then, be 1 second. The integrity, honesty, and truth thing. Honesty and truth are really not the same. Because honesty comes from you, and truth is a fact in a life situation. So in other words, let me try to think about how to say that. I mean, there are things that are true and things that are not true, right? But that's different than the way we process it and what we do with it. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, so now, would somebody be willing to read this text from Leviticus? And there's a reason why I'm going back into Bible about this, because we have to take a look at who we are as Jews and what it has to do with this idea of ethics. How much does it permeate our tradition? Does that make sense? Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Oh my God, I can hear myself. Okay?
Yeah.
Ye shall not steal, neither shall ye deal falsely, nor lie one to another. And ye shall not swear by my name falsely, so that thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not oppress thy neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of a hired servant shall not abide with thee all night until the morning. Thou shalt not curse the deaf. I'll turn it around.
Do you see the nor?
Yeah, I see that. Nor put a stumbling block before the blind. Thou shalt fear thy God. I am the Lord. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the person of the poor, nor favor the person of the mighty. But in righteousness thou shalt judge thy neighbor. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people. Neither shalt thou stand idly by the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thy heart. Thou shalt surely rebuke thy neighbor and not bear sin because of him.
Okay, there are a number of different things here. But we've got Vayikra, Leviticus. And this is representative of just about numerous things that are written in every book of Torah. And it's telling you a whole life responsibility. But some of the things that it's telling you are not easy. So there's a knowledge from the very beginning in Judaism that we are being asked to have a particular type of ethics, and it ain't gonna be so easy to do. And we might not always be able to do it. So let's take a look and see what these things are. Okay, you shall not steal. That's pretty easy, right? Don't take away something that belongs to somebody else. What other kind of stealing can there be besides breaking into somebody's house and stealing their diamond bracelet? Stealing their ideas. With the example of the theater not giving them the money. Okay, but we have that, and everybody's processed that. What's the stealing of ideas thing all about? Pardon? Plagiarism. So if you're writing something, oh, this is a big deal now, you know? It's always been a big deal, but it's definitely a big deal with this new AI, because now people are very often not writing it at all, and so plagiarism. So one of those things that people really don't think about, honestly. By the way, you shouldn't go on to Wikipedia. Wikipedia, how many people have used that source for finding out things about anything, right? Well, Wikipedia now has people, I'm just saying this as a side, but they now have people who write a lot for Wikipedia, who are allowed to alter anybody's thing that they've all written by regular people, right? They're allowed to alter those things. And if you look up something like Zionism in Wikipedia, you are only going to get something horrible. So something despicable and nothing else, because they've erased everything else. So be very careful when you use those things. But plagiarism, I know, when now Rabbi Jill was here, and when she was an intern, she was teaching at a college, and she was teaching literature. And she had a terrible time because everybody was working from home. She didn't meet them in person to learn what their capabilities were. So she had to be very careful when she was grading their papers, because she realized that a lot of people were plagiarizing everything, and she didn't know them in person to know what their capabilities were. So she had to, with every single paper that any student wrote, she had to sit with them either on Zoom or in person and say, oh, this is a very interesting word you used in your English essay. What does it mean? Well, the person who actually wrote it without plagiarizing would probably be able to tell you why they used that in their paper. The person who stumbled through what it was probably didn't deserve any kind of okay grade. So yes, there's this question of stealing from somebody else. But there are also, I think, Rosalie, you also have another direction of that in terms of stealing.
Because I've written a lot of papers, you have to give citations. You have to give credit to the original author. I think that protects you. And that's being very honest, is that if you write something down and you extend whatever they're saying, say, well, this is so-and-so wrote this. That's why you have citations, those little numbers.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then, you're being dishonest.
So my husband worked in the Silicon Valley, which is everybody munch up everybody else. And there would be people who would work in these companies, and they would come up with all sorts of ideas. They would write things. They would do it for their superiors, and their superiors would never, ever give them any credit for what they had done that the superior hadn't done. So when we think about stealing in Jewish law, it's not just yanking something. There are other ways that you can steal. I'm sorry, is this okay? Okay. So what about the idea of stealing somebody's sense of self? You are in a friends group, for example, and you really don't like one of the people you have to interact with. And so you gossip about that person, or share things about that person that you feel that they have done wrong, or you accuse them of something because you are very, you don't like them. I'm not talking about you. I'm just, this is generic. So when you do that, and I'm sure you've heard this during the high holidays, when you do that, you steal somebody's being. Because everybody else who hears whatever it is that you're saying may judge the person based on something they never experienced with them, but that you or me or whoever it is are putting out there. It is very difficult, and throughout Jewish history, not just biblical, but Talmudic, this idea of you stealing somebody's who they are by talking about them in a bad way is something that is very, very, very difficult to make up from. I think we did a text from the Talmud on this. What is worse, stealing somebody's money or stealing somebody's being? Reputation. So the rabbis in the Talmud say, absolutely, stealing their reputation is way worse than stealing their money. Do you remember this text? Because what can you do with money? You can repay. What can you do when you trash somebody, gossip about somebody or just say horrible things about them? There's nothing you can ever really do about that. So, stealing. You shouldn't deal falsely, which you know. You shouldn't lie to one another. Well, I just gave you that example. I'm sure, how many people here have done that? Have said something that's really not true, and you know it's really not true. Yeah, so, pardon? I think most everybody does that sometime.
Isn't there a difference between lie and lie?
Is there,
Lie to save somebody's life, like I'm thinking of the Holocaust.
oh, lie to save somebody's life, or
Or lie to make the other person happy.
or lie to make them happy.
Not big lie, just
Okay, so, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I just wonder, what if you hear a lie about somebody, what is your responsibility, when you hear this? You just don't sit idly and listen. But you say, no, that's not true about so-and-so, and you shouldn't say that. I mean, what is our responsibility in responding to somebody that is trashing another?
Yes, it's a good thing to speak up, but the text, Jewish text, will also tell you one of the really good ways to stop that, if somebody's doing that, is basically say, I'm out of here. Just, sorry, I'm not listening to this anymore.
But that's running away from responsibility.
Not necessarily, because you might be standing in that circle where somebody is getting criticized or trashed or whatever, and you don't know them. You don't know them. But nonetheless, even if you don't know them, you shouldn't hang around while somebody is doing that. And I know that that's really hard. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I went through this with my husband. I think he was taking a Talmud class with Rabbi Bernhardt at the time, and he was talking about Lashon Hara. And so his attitude was, don't talk about other people, because it doesn't matter if you're saying good things or bad things, it's gossip.
Right. And that is in Jewish law. Don't talk about anybody. And how possible is that really for humans? It's not possible for humans. But as we have talked about before, there are fences around Jewish law. So if in Jewish law it says, just don't talk about anybody at all, it should make you say, oh, well, I can't really do that, but I can not say bad things about people. But they say, do you know this Lashon Hara thing? They say you shouldn't say anything about people, because once you start saying something really great about Henry, then somebody who really doesn't like Henry will start to say the opposite in that group. So you've opened the door to discussion about Henry, poor Henry. So let's go on a little bit.
I know.
What? I didn't know that. Poor Henry. Anyway,
He'd love it.
so, and you're not supposed to profane God's name. So what does that really mean? People do this all the time. So have you ever heard anybody say, I swear to God? You know, like that kind of thing. Or when you are using words that, you know, that are not terribly foul, but you say, God, it, right? Like whatever it is, like you're doing what God doesn't want you to do. God's basically saying, don't put me in the middle of this. If you're really angry about something, don't put me in the middle of it. If you really want to say something that you're telling the truth and somebody else isn't, don't put me in the middle of it. That's what that is. Okay, don't oppress your neighbor. Anybody ever have a disagreement with a neighbor? in your community? My husband actually did something really terrible once. Nothing horrible happened. Nothing horrible happened. It was like 30 years ago, so I'm going to...
Now we forget.
All right, well, I won't tell you then.
You opened the door.
Good call, everybody. We had a neighbor behind us when we lived in Van Nuys, and he basically had a junkyard in his backyard. But he also had this huge tree that didn't drop any stuff on his property, but dropped everything on our property. And my husband would go out there and rake, and he would go out there and rake, and he would go out there and rake. And one day he said, I am done with this. And he's a chemist. So he created some kind of potion, and he took a hose and put it near the roots of the horrible tree. Didn't kill the tree. But, no, really, yeah. But that's oppressing your neighbor, I guess. Or you can think of some other things.
We have a neighbor who has a palm tree, and the little nuts fall off the palm tree.
Oh, a palm tree with nuts that fall.
And eats those.
And your dog eats them.
And it's a Chihuahua. She can't pass them. She has to throw them out. I have to run out before she gets there and pick them up. I never said anything to my neighbors. They're nice people. We help each other. I don't want to say, look, asshole, you're hurting my dogs.
Right. Okay. Good story. Much better story than my nasty husband did. So, you have a Chihuahua? Okay. So on that tree, a lot of big pods or seeds fall, and the little dog was going out and trying to swallow them but can't pass them, so you had to take care of them. But you never said anything to the neighbors because you get along and they help you. Right. Okay. So you get a really good ethic point. Ding, 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 ethic point. Okay. So you know about the hired servant? This is really important ethically, really important. If anybody has somebody who cleans their house, or you have somebody who comes to trim your tree, or you have somebody who comes to clean your gutters, and they work on, they work on their own, whoever it is, whatever you could be thinking of, you absolutely must pay them the same day they do that work for you.
They give you a bill right away.
So if it's a big company, then that person isn't affected by it, but the company might be affected by it, so you're supposed to pay it. But we're talking about an individual person coming to your house and doing something for you. You must pay them that day, because the idea is that those people who go to do those things for other people probably really need that money. So it's an ancient Jewish idea that you must give them their wages.
Rabbi, what about people like who clean the pool?
What about people who clean the pool?
Yeah, I mean, I pay him just once a month.
Okay, so it's a pool company, correct? That's a little bit different.
No, it's an individual man.
He's an individual man. So the idea in Jewish law would be that you would go to that individual man and you would say, I get an invoice from you once a month. Would it be better for you if I were paying you on the spot when you come out once a month or whatever, however often? It's really good. We can't do all of these things all the time. But all of them are ethical questions that we need to ask ourselves. And this is all in the same paragraph. And this was expected of people in ancient times as well. If somebody comes to set stone on, where your very small house is in your community, or where somebody else comes to help you with your animals, you must say that you can pay them and take care of it. Understood? Yes. Okay. Now, yes.
There could be some exceptions as well.
Oh, you have to use the mic.
There could be some exceptions as well. I have a plumber that I use for quite a while now. I'm sorry, I apologize. I have a plumber that I have used for quite a while now, and for years, and what happens is I call him, he comes in, then he sends me a bill on the email.
Yeah, that's what we just heard about the pool person as well.
And I pay him immediately. So he's happy. I fulfill my obligation as to pay for his labor. This is going on for years already.
Folks, nobody had a checkbook in biblical times. Nobody had a little receipt folder or a phone that they could type in their invoices in. People would come and do things for them, and they knew that the ethical thing to do was to pay them immediately. What I'm suggesting is, if you have a person who comes and cleans your house, which a lot of people have, that you ask when they start out if they need to be paid that day or if they can be paid within such a time, because a lot of people need that money. And I'm just telling you Torah here. Okay. So now, here's a couple of other ethics things. Is it okay? We read this whole thing, but they're real. So don't put a stumbling block before the blind. Does that just mean the blind? What does it mean? I've read it in Torah forever. And of course, it means, don't trip a person who can't see. But that's not really what it is. There are numbers of ways where people can be blind, not physically blind. What? Not aware, unaware. So what does that mean? When it should I say one? Go ahead.
Well, to me, it means that if you are able to help somebody to achieve something or go somewhere or whatever, you do what you can to make it easier.
Okay. If you encounter somebody who you could help to make some progress or to go somewhere or to, any of those things, helping them is making sure you don't put a stumbling block before the blind. Recognizing that you can try to teach somebody something, help somebody get there if they're looking for something, whatever it is. All right, so you can look at this on your own. It's great though, because it says you treat everybody equally. Everybody equally. If somebody's poor, of course you pay them the same day, but you don't treat a poor person as though they were something strange. You treat them with the same kind of respect and integrity that you would deal for everybody. So you don't favor anybody, and you don't diss somebody, as they say in the vernacular. You don't think that somebody who might be strong or important or more wealthy doesn't have issues where something really important also is something that they struggle with. So you have to treat people equally. Okay, and then if something is happening to your neighbor, don't just let it go. That's a really hard thing. To put yourself in a situation where if somebody's being harmed or if somebody is really in trouble, that you don't just say, not my responsibility. Okay, and here's one that's really important. You shouldn't hate your brother in your heart. You can rebuke your neighbor. It means if you see them doing something wrong, you can say, I think that was wrong. But you also have to respect them back. So they might not do what you want, they might not think the way you want, but there's a reason why this is the very last line. Don't hate your brother in your heart. Recognize the humanity of people, whatever the case may be. And that's really difficult. It's really difficult, particularly in a time, and I'm not talking politically, particularly in a time when so much is happening to the Jewish people. It's very hard to know who you can trust and who is talking about something behind your back, or worse yet, on internet. So these are not easy things. But in this one paragraph in the book of Leviticus, did we learn a lot of different ethical issues? It's there from the beginning. I'm going to skip the next one.
So, Rabbi, it's okay.
I just wonder if, because we're Jewish, that we have to extend ourselves even more so. Because it's very easy for people to criticize, oh, he's just Jewing around, that kind of terminology, and I've heard that. So I think we have an extra responsibility to try to do our best. I don't know. I mean, we're human still.
What Rosa said is something I think that we all do. But it's also something we need to think about because we're real people like everybody else. So throughout Jewish history, we've always, one of the reasons we get where we get is because we've all tried really hard to excel, right? in many, many different ways. I remember that when I had an I Love Israel bumper sticker, when people did bumper stickers, nowadays only kind of crazy people do bumper stickers, but when we used to do, do you have a bumper sticker? I'm not talking about one bumper sticker. You've seen the cars of people who have like 85 bumper stickers on them. Anyway, do you have 85 bumper stickers on?
I have one, but I'm taking it off because people damage my car because it's Jewish.
Okay, so.
I don't want it on my car. It's a shame, but I don't want it.
Okay, so I had an I Love Israel bumper sticker, but it was not for that reason that I felt, it was on my car. But I felt like you can't cut in front of somebody on the freeway. You know, you can't speed. You can't, there are so many different things you can't do because I have that, I can't do because I have that bumper sticker on my car, and they're not going to just think, oh, that's a stupid driver, that's a chutzpah driver, or something like that. They're going to think, oh, the pro-Israel person did that. Okay, so we get to a point in Exodus where it says, have people who are truthful, people who don't want to just overtake other people and get more than other people. Those people are the ones that we should respect in our communities. And Rashi says these are people who can be relied on with their words, and as a result of that, their words will be accepted. So I wrote, think of an example from your own life that exemplifies the person that Rashi seems to describe. Do you know a person who is so honest and is so clear that you know that you could totally rely on them to never lie to you? Anybody have an example of that? Yeah, somebody that you trust so much.
My father.
Okay. It'll be here. Bridget.
Well, my husband's cousin's husband, like he was a mensch. He was a wonderful person, and at his funeral, his daughter talked about how honest he was and how, I can't remember the examples, but he was wonderful, and you could always trust him.
Good, that's one.
Just a minute. My father, may rest in peace, you could bet on it that whatever he said, it was true. And he would stand up. If he didn't like something, he would stand up and fight for the truth.
That's really nice memory to have. Cecil, I'll get you both.
Basically, my approach, ever since I can remember, and maybe, I'm sorry? Closer, yeah. Perhaps has something to do with my character or something to do with the place I was born and raised in. I don't know. But it's part of me right now. Basically, when I meet anybody, that person in my mind seems to have 100% truth and honesty, and I really let that individual show me if he is a thief or a liar or whatever else. But it starts with 100%, and it can only go down by their actions.
Thank you, Cecil.
My husband, may he rest in peace, I always felt he was honest, and I would trust him with anything he said to me. Oh. My husband, may he rest in peace, was the most honest person that I knew, full of integrity, and I would trust anything that he ever said to me.
All right, we're going to go to a page that says give an example, that one. So this is really lovely because we had 3 specifics and one other view of how to gauge an honest person. And this comes out of very early Jewish learning. So can you see that page where it says our sages of blessed memory underneath? Okay, what I want to do now is go to the Psalm of David. Lord, who shall sojourn in your tabernacle? Who shall dwell on your holy mountain? The person that walks uprightly, that works deeds of righteousness, and speaks the truth in his heart. Now this psalm is often used at people's funerals. It's often used to say, who really is a good person? So what do you think it means to say, speak the truth in your heart? And why is that an ethic? This is before you even get into the world of people and you're speaking to them. It comes from within. You speak the truth from the heart. Bridget?
You don't lie to yourself.
Ah, you don't lie to yourself. Good one. So anything else? So there are a lot of things that we as human beings, we go through and we figure it out internally, right? Before we act on a number of different things, sometimes we overdo it. And we mull it over and mull it over and mull it over and mull it over. So there's always some kind of internal fight that we have when we're making big decisions about what to do. Right? It's happened to all of us. We think through things. We make decisions about things. We worry about things. We get angry about things, and it's all churning in us. So in the psalm, it says you really need to start with the element of truth inside yourself. To really take a look at yourself and see, am I living up to what I think I want to be, not what somebody else thinks? Does that make any sense to you? So all of these things, the reason that they mean something to me that I wanted to share with you is that this is all of what Jewish law is about. You have it from the very, very beginning, that this whole issue of what we say, what we do, what we think inside ourselves, how we teach ourselves, that's more important than anything. So what I want to do now is move on, because I think you've got the idea that all of these texts are about peace, truth.
I want to say something. I think that it's very important as a child to be taught these things by your parents, because I find that even with teenagers now, or even people who are older who weren't raised with ethical behavior, that they don't have it. You know, how can you evaluate yourself when in growing up you didn't have somebody who was helping you develop into a better person? So I think we have responsibility with our children to teach them right and wrong and to follow what the good book says.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who unfortunately don't have the guidance. And we live in a society now where religion isn't really important. So there are not a lot of people taking a look at these things that might help to guide them. I want to turn the page to where it says truth and deception in Scripture. Are we out of time? Okay. This is a prayer on that truth and deception in Scripture. Do you see that page? It looks like this. Well, that's not going to help you. It says a prayer for beginning study. Do you see that? So I want you to just see this. Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan was a very well-respected rabbi who founded a new type of Judaism, Reconstructionist Judaism. We could talk about another time. So here's what he wrote. Let's read it together. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, O God of truth, deliver us. So, what does it mean? Sorry. What does it mean to shrink from a new truth? You don't want to believe it. Something new that you find out, right? Or something new that, that you can't really process because you're used to something else, that kind of thing. From the laziness that is content with half-truths. We all do that sometimes, don't we?
Yeah,
It's good enough. I don't want to worry about it anymore. Right. And then from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth. Because all of us know people, and sometimes it's us, where we think that we have the expertise or the knowledge or the real answer or whatever it is. Cantor Aronoff and I were talking this morning, and sometimes, most of the time we agree on everything, and then sometimes we'll be working on something and we don't agree, and both of us get very, but I'm right, and it is something that it makes you think about if you really take it in, like how am I thinking that I am, that I have the answer, whatever the answer is. So has anybody ever, I think this would be a great thing for anybody to read or think about before they start studying something, learning something new, encountering somebody new. Please help me be a person who just doesn't jump to conclusions, or who just doesn't find ourselves content with something that really kind of strikes us wrong inside. Anybody else have another response to that?
We have to have an open mind. How do you do that? If you're closed-minded to begin with.
You have to have an open mind. You can't just be closed-minded. Okay.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I read a book that, sorry. I read a book and...
Turn to them.
Hello. One of the books I read was stating that they think Columbus was Jewish. And so it was a few years ago. So when I presented to my friends, they said, oh, yeah, Sarah said, God forbid, no, I don't want him to be Jewish. So anyway, now it came out that, yep.
So, yeah, one day I really want to do MID with you, talking about that whole thing about Columbus and his ship, and all of the things that have turned up over history about it when Ferdinand and Isabella sent him on this. And the other thing I want to one day teach you is, because since you brought up Columbus, is about the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean. So hopefully one day we will do some of that as well. So this is a song. The psalm at the bottom of the page. Who is the man who delights in life, who loves days, seeking goodness? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. I don't know if you've heard this song, and I have a terrible voice, but I'm going to sing it. Mi ha'ish hechafetz chayim ohev yamim Ohev yamim lirotov. So I'll just do the beginning like that. But once you get to Psalms, all of this that we're supposed to do in our lives are wrapped up. So you can take this and take a look at some more. There's some very nice stuff in here. But I hope that this was an interesting discussion for you about ethics as they manifest themselves in different ways. So let me leave you with this. We are human. God created us with free will. We have a Yetzer Tov, a good inclination, and a Yetzer Ra, a bad inclination. And in Judaism, it says that you need to have a combination, you need to find the happy medium. Because if people did not have a little bit of selfishness, if people did not have a little bit of desire, if people didn't have a little bit of those things that if you do too much of them, they're definitely Yetzer Hara. But if you don't do them, you don't find a lover and a spouse. You don't build a house for yourself. You don't seek to have children or engage with other people. Because you need a little bit of those self things, whether it be passion or whether it be wanting something. It's okay in our tradition to want to earn money. But in our tradition, it's also absolutely imperative that you give money, right? So we have both of those inclinations. And it means that we are never perfect. And God created us with the opportunity to make those choices. As we said last week, if not, we would still be in the Garden of Eden. But how good would that be? It's what we have done as human beings have sometimes been horrendous. And what we have done as human beings have sometimes been stellarly beautiful. And we are supposed to, because of what God says, find that medium that brings together these things, which means we're not always perfect. And that's okay, as long as we strive to be as good as we can be. So that's it for today.
So, Rabbi, I do want to say something. You mentioned Columbus and Jewish pirates and all. And you know what? We give Rabbi Mark license to come in and teach something that is close to his heart, which may not be relevant to the diaspora. So we give you license to come in and talk about something close to your heart sometime. Because those of you who don't know, Columbus, it was found that he's Sephardic Jew.
I might just do that one day. I told you that every week I was going to give you something to think about. So today, this is something about returning lost objects when you find them. So could everybody please take one of these and take a look at, this is your homework. Take a look at this ethical question, and when we get together next week, we'll see how you feel about it.
Maybe test it. I just want to share some.
Just please pass these out so that everybody can get them.
Yeah, I know, I was having trouble before.
What were you having trouble with?
Oh, just separating the papers, the pages.
Rosie, this is Sarah. She zoomed into our service because she didn't like it.
Rabbi? Yes. Some time ago, I took a class in which there was a perfect example about good and bad. Yes, sir. Yes,
Everybody
sir.
have one?
Okay. Maybe next class, you give me a chance to share your class. It basically is like this. A grandfather was teaching his grandson about life under the sea. And he told him, and it's not a Jewish thing, it's from Native American. It says, in yourself, you have two wolves, the good wolf and the bad wolf. And they're always fighting. So the grandson says, well, Grandpa, which one is? He says, the one you feed.
Yes, remind me next week.
I will.
I think you should consider